Liechtenstein at the UN, and yeah, that gives me the keyword that I should ask whether everybody is fine that this meeting will be recorded. I hope got it.
Better, yes. Now we can see you.
Okay, now you can see me.
Hello, hello.
See that you can see me.
No, now move back into the light, Petra, so we can see you.
I will try my best.
Or get closer to the, there we are, much better, much better.
Okay,
yeah.
So yeah, it's a pleasure to welcome you all at this strategic roundtable discussion with parliamentarians on the protection of the deep seabed. You might be aware that we know much more about the moon than we know about the deep seabed, and you also might know that whenever new species are discovered, the vast majority of them come from the from under the surface of the oceans. So we do know only very little about the impact of the life under the sea to our common environment, and have no idea about the biodiversity of the deep seabed. And I'm quite sure that there is an interdependence between, now I hear myself as well, with the rest of the earth, and it's very likely that there is an interdependence. So it doesn't wonder that only a few years ago, our board raised the need for an initiative to protect the deep seabeds within our oceans campaign. And the ocean campaigns, for those who are not aware, is in general aims to end impunity for crimes committed on and against the world's oceans and their related human rights violations. And there are various human rights violations combined with the ocean. Our board's vision from some years ago has now become reality. The Oceans Campaign Protect on the impacts of deep seabed mining was officially launched at the second CAP Oceans during our PGA 42nd annual forum in December last year, in partnership with the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition, which PGA has joined based on our common goals. This project aims to ensure decisions regarding deep seabed mining will be exclusively informed by science and conservation of biodiversity and ecosystems, and not by economic interests. So we stand today at a unique point in history with the power to prevent the environmental destruction of new frontier and possible extinction even across the deep seabed by stopping the large-scale exploitation of the deep seabed before it had begun. We will hear in a moment from Mr. Matthew Gianni, who is with us online. He is the co-founder of Deep Sea Conversation Coalition on the reasons behind the increasing calls for a moratorium on deep seabed mining. In a short time, PGA member parliamentarians will give increased visibility on the call for a moratorium. We will hear from Honorable Ralph Regenvanu from Vanuatu, who is also with us, hopefully I can see him now, who is chair of the Pacific Parliamentarians Alliance on Deep Seabed Mining on efforts in the Pacific region. I hope to hear from each of you here in the room during the interactive discussion later on your thoughts and efforts and positions on the protection of the deep seabed. This is an exciting opportunity for us to have an open dialogue on the issue that impacts us all, impacts all humankind. As it's a hybrid format meeting, I will also take the opportunity to introduce some of our guests and guests joining us online. It's an honor to have many participants from embassies with us in my list, but I'm not able to see whether it's really true at the moment. We have representatives from the Seychelles and Costa Rica, from Austria, the European delegation, to the UN from Italy, and I especially want to welcome Mary Lou McPherson, my old friend from the Canadian Senate. We also have a member of the European Parliament, Marie Toussaint from France, and board members who are very involved with the whole campaign. Valerie Woods, the Speaker of the Parliament from Belize, and Honorable Bernard George from the Seychelles, and we hope that you'll stay healthy because you couldn't travel. So that's a pity that we only have you online, but all the best to you. Yes, I'm looking forward to a very fruitful hybrid discussion. And now I want to turn to Mr. Gianni, who will give us an introduction into the whole issue. Please.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And thank you as well to the mission of Liechtenstein for agreeing to host the meeting. And we're very pleased and honored to be able to do this together with the Parliamentarians for Global Action. I'll share my screen. I have a PowerPoint. Is that okay? Let's see. It doesn't seem to want to share. Here we go. Okay. Very briefly, the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition consists of over 100 organizations worldwide, predominantly environmental organizations, but others, including fisher folks organizations. And let me start by saying, first of all, I have probably more slides than I'll be able to fit into a 10-minute presentation, but I wanted to have this, add the extra slides so that folks have this and can refer to some of the links and so forth and the information in the messaging, in the presentation. But first, to begin, it's worth reminding that recalling that the Law of the Sea Convention, Part 11, requires the International Seabed Authority to take necessary measures to ensure effective protection for the marine environment from harmful effects and to prevent damage to the flora and fauna of the marine environment. So these are key obligations contained in the seabed mining provisions of the Law of the Sea Convention. And in addition, the International Seabed Authority is obligated to act on behalf of and for the benefit of humankind as a whole. And this is reinforced in a variety of articles, as well as in the paragraph 6 of the preamble to the Law of the Sea Convention. So what is the concern about deep seabed mining in the international areas of the world's ocean or the international seabed area? Well, this is a paper from Nature Geoscience, which basically written by a group of scientists and some policy folks, including myself. And the conclusion is that biodiversity loss from deep seabed mining will be unavoidable and irreversible on human timescales, and that offsets in the deep sea will be biodiversity offsets will be scientifically meaningless. And in a paper published the same year, specifically looking at the biodiversity of the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, which is the area where most of the commercial interest in the international seabed area currently lies, and where the ISA is currently negotiating regulations to open up that area to deep seabed mining. The conclusion there was 1/2 of the species discovered to date depend on the nodules and that are in that area, and that the nodules and nodule-dependent animals may take millions of years to recover from the impacts of mining. And even the partial recovery of the animals living in the sediment may take hundreds to thousands of years. So clearly long-term, virtually, or for all practical purposes, permanent impacts. And while scientists aren't clear on the full extent of the impacts, primarily because the life in this part of the deep ocean, as well as many other areas, that a lot more is yet to be discovered. Scientists believe they're only discovering a small percentage of the animals that live in the deep ocean water and on the deep ocean seabed. The scale of the impacts of the mining operations is becoming increasingly clear. So this is the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, the Eastern Pacific, between the North American continent and Pacific Island nation, Hawaii and Pacific Island nations. And it's quite a large area, about 4.5 million square kilometers, of which about 1.3 million square kilometers have been leased for exploration under 17 exploration contracts, and another 600 to 800,000 square kilometers have been held in reserve for additional exploration contracts, primarily those that would be applied for from developing states. So quite a large area, and one of the biggest of the scientific research projects currently underway, JPI Ocean's Mining Impact 1 and Mining Impact 2, have found within nodule abundant ecosystems, abundant life forms that depend on the nodules for some part of their life history, either something they need to attach to, or species use those animals that are attached to the nodules for some portion of their life history. Now, the size of these mining operations needs to be recognized. Each individual mining operation would occur over the course of within a 75,000 square kilometer claim area. There's a picture here of the Benelux countries, Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. And the mining wouldn't be concentration all in one place. It would be spread out across the claim area where you see nodules concentrated. So the black images on this rather crude map, and I apologize, I'm not particularly good at animation here, represent the areas that would actually be mined for the nodules, and then the lines around them would represent more or less what the modeling seems showing to date would be the extent of the flows of plumes of sediment across the seabed beyond the mining sites. And scientists estimate that based on the production targets discussed in the context of the ISA, each mining operation would effectively strip mine about 10 to 12,000 square kilometers over the course of a 30-year contract period. The plume flows would extend over the course of another 10 to 30,000 square kilometers in the areas beyond the actual mining itself. Again, across the or 20 to 40,000 anyway, 20 to 40,000 square kilometer footprint altogether. And concentrations in the water column would be orders of magnitude higher than the concentrations of sediment or organic material that the animals living on or directly above the seabed are accustomed to. When it comes to mid-water plumes, this is the plumes that would be generated by the discharge of the wastewater, the sediment, and the small particles of the nodule ores that would be pumped up to the ships and then discarded back over the side, or discharged back over the side. And I should stop there and basically say, not necessarily directly over the side of the ships. The company that is likely to apply for a license, the first to be applied for a mining license here, is stating that they will discharge this sediment and water at about 1,200 meters depth, recognizing the seafloor in this area is between 3,000 to 5,000 meters depth, depending on where they're mining. But at any rate, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology modeled plume flows based on the use of sediment from the seabed here, working with one of the contractors of the ISA, one of the companies that actually has an exploration license, and concluded that the sediment, wastewater, and mining finds from the ships could travel up to 1,400 kilometers through the mid-water, through the water column, before finally settling on the bottom, and in multiple directions. So you're looking at a potential footprint of literally millions of square kilometers and potentially millions of cubic kilometers of open ocean and deep sea habitat, and this from a single mining operation. And in addition, you would have noise and light being generated, as well as the sediment being discharged that could impact on fisheries, for example, tuna fisheries in the Northwest Pacific or the Eastern Pacific, the Western Indian Ocean, where there are also claims, and the Mid-Atlantic, along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, where exploration claims have been granted. And impact recovery, as I mentioned, many of the species are new to science. And again, the nodule and nodule-dependent animals may take millions of years to recover from the impacts of mining operations. And again, recognizing the sheer spatial scale of those impacts would be quite large. There are some no-go zones that have been established in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone by the International Seabed Authority, but it still leaves a lot to be impacted, exploited, damaged, and ultimately destroyed, including the very real potential scientists have warned for species extinctions. And of course, we know that the deep sea is already under stress from climate change related impacts, pollution, plastic, persistent organic pollutants in deep sea fish, and the impacts of deep sea trawling, at least down to about 2,000 meters, which is the depths at which that trawling takes place. So in addition to the environmental impacts, which should give pause, there are concerns about the politics and the structural aspects, including the bylaws of the International Seabed Authority. There are use it or lose it incentives. At some point, mining companies or states that hold the mining exploration contracts may risk losing their exploration claims unless they transition from exploration to exploitation to commercial mining. These could provide perverse incentives to mine. All countries have an equal opportunity to mine or becoming a sponsoring state to sponsor an entity to mine. And this was a very noble and progressive idea in the 1970s. Developing countries fought very hard for this. But fast forward to 2022, and the question really remains is, can the ISA say no to any country that applies for a mining license, given that it's legally bound to give all countries equal opportunities to mine? And there's a question of equity. Currently, at least 25 of the 31 exploration contracts that the ISA has issued to date are in the hands of 7 countries: China, France, Germany, India, Japan, Korea, and Russia, and 3 companies. UK Seabed Resources, a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin in the US, and this is the UK is the sponsoring state for that company. Global Sea Mineral Resources, Belgium being the sponsoring state, and Deep Green, the metals company, which is from Canada, and their sponsoring states are 3 of the countries in the South Pacific. They have 3 licenses, actually. The voting structure is really a major issue. So to begin with, the Legal and Technical Commission, an advisory body, has virtual decision-making authority in the ISA on who gets to get a contract, where they get to mine, and how many contracts or mining licenses are given. The second point, the voting structure, and we have some literature on this we can point you toward, but is a major problem, because if 16 individuals, or even less, but 16 individuals on the Legal and Technical Commission recommend that a country or a company get a mining license, as few as 2 country members of the ISA Council can guarantee that the company will get a license, even if the other 34 member countries of the Council of the ISA oppose it. And 131 members have no say, no vote in granting licenses or prohibiting granting licenses, denial of applications for licenses. The ISA has 167 member nations, plus the European Union. All countries that have ratified the Law of the Sea Convention are members of the ISA, but really only a small number of those countries have any real say in the decisions that are made by the ISA, and even they are largely beholden to recommendations from the Legal and Technical Commission, the 30 individuals who serve in their individual capacity on this advisory body of the ISA. The economics of the mining of these nodules, again, the negotiations at the moment are directed toward opening the nodule mining, or basically regulating nodule mining. The idea being that this is the first type of mining that countries and companies will apply for. At any rate, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology was contracted by the Secretary of the ISA to do an assessment of the economics for the purpose of giving countries information around which to negotiate a royalty regime. And the conclusion of MIT was threefold. Number one, the payout to ISA countries, to the financial benefit to all countries combined that are members of the ISA, will be very small on a per country, per license basis. But potentially the mining could be very profitable for individual companies or states that sponsor those companies to get licenses through corporate taxation and charging fees and other types of financial arrangements. And the economics is, and this is our conclusion based on those first 2 points, that the economics is likely to drive the industry. If the ISA begins issuing licenses and the first companies that undertake mining operations prove profitable, many more countries and companies are likely to join in. and take advantage of the economic bonanza. And the International Seabed Authority, given its bylaws and its constitutional structure, not to mention the politics of the organization, is not likely to be able to say no to many, if any, applications to mine. So why mine? The hype. So all this damage, etc. Well, I'm using a quote here from Gerard Barron, chairman and CEO of the Metals Company, which is the first company that intends to apply for a mining license in the in the second half of 2023 are their current plans. He says the green transition is going to require hundreds of millions of tons of nickel, copper, and cobalt. However, when you look at the numbers at the ISA that are being generated by the contractors in terms of assessing the minerals grade of these metals in the Clarion-Clipperton zone, even just to double current terrestrial production of nickel, cobalt, copper, and manganese would require, and here I have it in this oval here, opening up 62 mines to mine for nickel, 22 mines to mine for cobalt, 648 mines to mine for copper, and 24 for manganese. And that's simply not going to happen. It's just not possible. And so the conclusion that we come to is that mining the deep sea, even at a very large scale, is only likely to produce relatively small quantities of additional metals in the global market space of these marketplace of these four metals, two of which, nickel and cobalt, are of great interest to the electric vehicle industry. And speaking of which, there are already changing technologies to build electric vehicles. The first electric vehicles were fairly cobalt and nickel intensive, but a lot of the companies, including Tesla, Ford, BYD, Volkswagen, and others, are moving toward lithium iron phosphate batteries rather than lithium, manganese, cobalt, copper, cobalt, and nickel batteries. And other reports have indicated that even to transition to a 100% renewable energy economy, deep sea bed mining is not needed to get the metals that are necessary to do so. So on the question of Marlu, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to say something there? Okay. I've got another 3 or 4 minutes here. But the question then from the political side of things and the legal side of things is, the BB&J negotiations are underway, as all of you are well aware. And one can ask a question, is this a tale of two instruments? On the one hand, the BB&J agreement states are driving toward the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity in AB&J, whereas on the other hand, the ISA mining code under negotiation is likely to lead to large-scale biodiversity loss in deep sea and open ocean ecosystems. And there's really a critical need to recognize that the ISA process is at odds, or should be considered at odds, with what states are attempting to accomplish through negotiating the third implementing agreement of UNCLOS, the BB&J agreement. We would also argue that deep sea bed mining is incompatible with the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular target SDG 14, target 14.2. By 2020, sustainably manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystems to avoid significant adverse, strengthen their resilience, and take action for their restoration. And all the science, certainly in relation to mining in the Clarion-Clipperton zone, as well as mining active hydrothermal vents and other types of mining, are indicating that the mining is likely to cause significant adverse impacts on marine ecosystems, weaken their resilience, e.g. to climate change impacts, and cause damage from which they may never recover. And there are issues related to sustainable patterns of production and consumption. Will deep sea bed mining exacerbate efforts to try to move towards sustainable production and consumption by flooding the market with cheap metals? There is growing support for a moratorium. The European Parliament has come out calling for a moratorium. The Chilean Senate, the Senate in Guam, I think we'll hear about this later. Legislatures of Canary Islands, Galicia, and others have adopted moratorium resolutions. Over 600 marine scientists and policy experts from 44 countries are calling for a moratorium on deep sea bed mining. They call it a pause because of the scientific concerns, including the real risk of species extinction. And a growing group of companies, automobile companies, tech companies, banks, Fishing industry associations are also calling for a moratorium, and we have those all up online under the link you see at the bottom of this page. Others include the 44 government ministries and the agencies from 37 countries, plus the 531, actually, NGOs and indigenous peoples groups that voted to support a deep sea bed mining moratorium resolution at the IUCN World Conservation Congress in September of 2021. There's the Pacific Blue Line ban, call for a ban on deep sea bed mining in the Pacific, which Ralph Regenabu will no doubt address. And although not calling for a moratorium necessarily, it's worth pointing out here that the UK House of Commons Environment Audit Committee concluded that deep sea bed mining would have catastrophic impacts on the seafloor and areas where it was permitted, that the ISA benefiting from revenues as well as regulating the mining would be a clear conflict of interest, and that critically, the case for deep sea bed mining has not been made. Deep sea mining has not been made, i.e. the idea that the world has to mine these metals rather than the mining would occur for the benefit of few countries and companies. And we have reports from the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, the Ocean Solutions Report. And most recently, just this month, this month, just a day or two ago, the UNEP Finance Initiative, concluding Harmel Marine Extractives report on deep sea bed mining, both concluded that deep sea bed mining is unsustainable and should not be financed nor considered a part of any sort of global sustainable blue economy. So to conclude, a moratorium on deep sea bed mining, yes, it's possible, legally defensible, arguably required under the precautionary approach, and it's consistent with contemporary commitments to protecting biodiversity and implementing the UN's SDGs, as well as other commitments such as those made in the Rio +20 conference and going all the way back to the Johannesburg Plan of Implementation adopted by the World Summit on Sustainable Development in 2002. And is there a future for a role for the ISA in the context of these concerns? Yes, there is, because it is critical to maintain exercise authority over activities in the international areas of the world seabed through a multilateral process. And the ISA is the body to do that. But it really does need to be reformed and transformed. So instead of mining, directed toward promoting, coordinating, and/or conducting marine scientific research on the deep sea and open ocean, and in particular on its role, the role of these areas in carbon sequestration and regulation of planetary climate processes. This is what we need from the deep sea, to understand that and to ensure that we're not interfering with much needed global carbon sinks, rather than trying to look at the deep sea as a source of economic activity for a few countries or companies that can make money off mining those metals. And finally, just a reminder, we're living in the Anthropocene. Some say clearly we are in the midst of one of the great extinction spasms of geological history. The Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services report, as I'm sure you're all familiar with, has warned that 1 million species are at risk of extinction, many over the next few decades, from direct exploitation, mortality, and habitat loss. And I'll finalize by just saying these are a couple quotes from two of the leading scientists who are experts on deep sea ecosystems in particular, but not limited to the Clarion-Clipperton zone. One is a seabed life expert, the other is a water column expert. And Jeff Drazen, who's the author of the first quote, said, "It's one of the most biodiverse areas that we've ever sampled on the abyssal plains. We're about to make one of the biggest transformations that humans ever made to the surface of the planet. We're going to strip mine a massive habitat, and once it's gone, it isn't coming back." And Craig Smith pretty much said the same thing in an article that was published, I think, just last month. "Once we destroy vast areas of the deep sea habitat, there will be no going back. Ecosystems will take millions of years to recover." So clearly a pause, a moratorium is warranted before the ISA barrels ahead and starts opening up this particular area of the ocean, as well as others, to applications for mining license in the next year or two. So thank you. And here's a few links to some of the articles that have been published over the last year or so that give a good background information and more in-depth information on the politics and the companies involved. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chuanye. I very much hope that you could share the presentation and all the links with us, because we had no chance to get them all now, but then we could follow up on that. And we also will hear in some minutes about a possible global parliamentary declaration on this issue. But first we will listen to a pre-recorded video statement by Honorable Ralph Regenvanu from Vanuatu. And I hope that will work now. It will.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be joining you today for this meeting. My name is Ralph Regenvanu, and I am the leader of the opposition in Vanuatu. This is my fourth term in Parliament, and previously I was the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Lands in the last government. I'm speaking to you as the chairman of the new Pacific Parliamentarians Alliance on Deep Sea Mining, which we just launched in April at the Palau Our Oceans Conference. So the main reason we have formed this alliance is basically to try and convince other Pacific Island countries to adopt a regional approach to deep sea mining. What is happening now is that the Pacific region, as you know, is at the forefront of this new experimental industry. And we now have we have had 5 Pacific Island states indicate interest in going down the path of deep sea mining. Some are quite advanced, like Nauru and the Cook Islands, and others have just expressed their interest. For example, Tonga, Kiribati, Tuvalu. Our objective is to talk with our Pacific colleagues, build up a network of legislators in the Pacific to try and see if we can all come to a regional position, which will mean that these states that are advancing ahead of us come back and talk with the rest of us, including some states that are proposing a moratorium, like Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Palau, Vanuatu, Tuvalu. So we come to a regional position because in the past, regionalism has always served the Pacific Islands well. We have managed to, as a region, with a joint position, influence, for example, the UNFCCC negotiations. We were the ones who were able to bring that to the target of 1.5 degrees Celsius. We have been able to respond very well to experimental nuclear testing in the Pacific through the Rarotonga Treaty of the South Pacific, which declares a nuclear-free zone. And so our argument is that the Pacific needs to adopt a regional position, and therefore these countries that are trying to move ahead without the rest of us, without a consensus, need to come back and talk with us and sit at the same table, and we discuss our fears, what opportunities they see in pursuing this path, so that we can adopt a regional position, which is why we have adopted the position of a moratorium, not a ban. Many of us believe in a ban, but a moratorium is a compromise position, so that we can all come together and say, let's agree to put off any deep sea mining until we have a regional position. And I think this aligns with the position of the PGA as well, in that we are trying to get the rules set out by the ISA before anyone proceeds with deep sea mining. We're looking very much forward to collaborating with the PGA. I was very excited to hear that you are already well advanced on this issue. I've been able to talk to the program officer, Sarah, and I'm looking forward to speaking with some of your members in the coming week. But we have some very good members of our alliance. We have legislators from most of the legislatures in the South Pacific, including the North Pacific. We have senators from Guam. We have the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Tuvalu. And Tuvalu has taken the very important step just in the last month since the formation of our alliance to inform the ISA that it's withdrawing its application to proceed with deep sea mining, and it's now adopted the position of the alliance. We're hoping that the other countries will. Fiji is a very strong country. The government is actually taking a stand on this issue to say there has to be a moratorium. There are other governments in the region that are taking that position. Our members as I stated, have come from the North Pacific, from all the Melanesian states, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Vanuatu, the president of the New Caledonia Congress, which is a French territory in the Pacific, but they're looking at adopting that position for that territory. We have French Polynesia, we have the Minister of Environment from Samoa. So we have some potentially very good allies, and we hope very much to join into this global movement that PGA is pushing ahead with, and provide that local perspective and support. And we hope very much that we can influence the ISA at its next meeting in August through working together to come up with a resolution that stops any further advance on the issue of deep sea mining until we all agree on a common ground for it, and hopefully not agree to proceed. I think that's all I'll say at this point, but it's an honor to be in touch with you all, and I look forward to further collaboration. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. I see that Mary Lou already asked for the floor, and according to the agenda, I hand over now to Angela, who will moderate this session, and I think that it's helpful to have it close to you.
Okay, thank you very much. As a Member of Parliament from Jamaica, it is an honor to chair this interactive dialogue on deep seabed mining. As we have just heard from Honorable Regan Vanu of Vanuatu, the health and protection of the oceans is especially important to island nations, and we welcome the kind of progress that we have heard from him. We deeply value and truly appreciate the sustainability of the oceans. Kingston, Jamaica, is also the home of the International Seabed Authority headquarters, making this topic particularly relevant for me. As a fellow board member, Honorable Bear has mentioned earlier, this project was launched during the second CAP Oceans in December. And at its close, all parliamentarians in attendance committed through the Belma Plan of Action to prevent the destruction of a new frontier, the deep seabed. It is wonderful that we are convening today as a follow-up to our goals from the second CAP Oceans. I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion and to hear your insight on the calls for the adoption of a moratorium on deep seabed mining until sufficient scientific research has been conducted. The floor is now open for discussion, but I see that Senator McFedron from Canada would like to speak, so I'm going to ask her to join.
She's muted.
Oh, you need to unmute, is that what it is?
But she's frozen, I think.
Oh.
Ah, okay, no. Oh,
Oh, there you go.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? I can put my headset on. Yeah, okay, good. I'm really very concerned because the focus of our discussion is on parliamentarians and how parliamentarians can be working with civil society and scientists in order to bring about the kind of, I think, very bold actions that are needed here. And so my question is geared to the upcoming meeting in August. And it's situated for me as a senator, as a parliamentarian, in the reality that our parliament will rise for the summer in about 2 weeks' time. So much of what has to be done probably has to be done with our officials and our diplomats. And I wondered whether there was in development by PGA basically a to-do list or a task list that parliamentarians should be trying to undertake. In my case, in Canada, I sit on the Fisheries and Oceans Committee, the standing committee for the Senate of Canada, and I have been asking questions of our fisheries minister and officials. So far, all of the questions about the meeting coming up in August and the ISA itself as a body and the moratorium have received no substantive answers. So clearly, this is a demanding, very important project for parliamentarians to undertake. So any guidance on this will be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if David wants to respond to the question that was asked.
And I hope that I am heard. Maybe Sarah can then elaborate on the toolkit that she prepared. What I would like maybe to, before we answer to the senator, I think we are missing one piece of information. I think it would be useful to understand, maybe there is one of the legal advisors who is listening to us from the permanent missions, to explain us what are the dynamics, what needs to happen for this moratorium to be in place, who's deciding, when, who's proposing, who's opposing, a bit more of a strategic information. And I don't know if Senator Boris.
Yes, I would like to add a question to your question, because I would like to know how we can persuade countries and governments who are not really very much involved in deep sea mining, how we can get their support. So what's the strategy towards those governments? Because I think it's a very serious matter we are discussing, but not all countries are, for instance, bordering on an ocean and have, like Austria, for instance. So it's very important if we have some kind of toolkit or talking points towards those governments to support this initiative.
Okay, could I probably go back to Matthew to see if you could assist in terms of just answering, and then I'll come to some of the others who have indicated their interest.
Costa Rica asking the floor. It's Gina from Costa Rica.
Right, but what I wanted to do is to see if we could get some answers, and then which would help the conversation to flow. And then I will come to, I have Petra and Gina. Matthew, Gianni. No, I don't know what's happening there, so I probably get.
Yeah, hi, sorry.
No problem, no problem.
I froze there briefly, so I didn't catch the whole question. Why don't I go after Ambassador Guillen and the other speaker?
No problem. So
Thank you.
I'll move to Costa Rica, and then Patrick.
Thank you very much, Excellency, and good morning to everyone. I want to thank the Parliamentarians for Global Action for organizing these, and the missions in New York that are participating, and all the experts that are participating. I just want to introduce myself very quickly. I am the ambassador of Costa Rica to Jamaica, but also permanent representative to the ISA. And I'm also the one of the facilitators on the negotiations of the regulations. I just want to address a few things. First of all, I think we need to be very clear that what we're talking about is the common heritage of mankind, and because it is the common heritage of mankind, special rules apply. But for these special rules to apply, countries who are the ones who constitute the Seabed Authority have to be vigilant and proactive and make sure that those rules that are there apply. And I'm coming to this because, okay, this is so many things I would like to share, but first of all, the Seabed Authority, sometimes we speak of it as if it were like this entity that moves by itself, and no, it's member states. But the biggest problem that we face at the ISA is the lack of interest and participation of their member states. Very few countries participate. Most countries that participate are the ones that have interest in mining. So it's very few countries that are concerned about the environment who attend. And many of those countries who attend do not send experts. Many times it's just the ambassador appointed to Jamaica who, as an additional responsibility, but without any real knowledge of seabed mining, and without, or with very little support from capital, have to attend the meetings. So like the first time I attended a meeting, I was very surprised to see the little participation of countries defending the environmental requirements that should be #1 in the agenda for the authority. So there's been these countries who are interested in mining, because this is eventually, if it happens, is going to give a lot of money to those companies, have tried to push this idea, sometimes with the support of, I believe, and this is my personal opinion, sometimes with the support of some of the people in the Secretariat, that mining has to happen. And that the right to mine has to be observed considered like in a balance with the obligation to preserve the marine environment. Because there's one article, Article 145 of UNCLOS, that says that the authority has to ensure the effective protection of the marine environment from any harm that may arise from activities in the area. So if you see this, I'm sorry. So if you see this is an absolute obligation. It doesn't say you may want to protect or maybe try to protect while you mine. It is not that way. It's ensure the effective protection of the marine environment from any harm that may happen. So that is the precautionary principle in itself, right? The thing is that more and more countries are saying, yes, we have to reach a balance between the need to mine and the protection of the environment. And some of us, Costa Rica, Chile, New Zealand, there's a group of countries who are very strongly saying no. The obligation for protection is #1, okay? But the problem that we have is that very few countries attend. So for Costa Rica, like, yes, definitely, we are not ready to mine. We don't have enough information. If we do it now, we're probably going to destroy these precious things that we haven't even researched enough. But the thing is, the way to do it is by attending the meetings of the Seabed Authority in Kingston. Because yes, political declarations are good, NGOs have their role, which is very crucial, which is research and share information. And of course, you can push for a moratorium, but the only way that this is really going to have an effect is if countries attend the meeting and during the negotiations demand environmental safeguards that are so strict and so thorough that if we are not ready to mine, nobody will be able to mine. So it would be a de facto moratorium. But you can do all these political declarations, and if countries don't go there, if they say, yes, we want a moratorium and sign a document, but then they don't send their representatives to Kingston, and those representatives don't demand and make sure that the regulations are really robust in the environmental aspects, those who are attending will advance the negotiations, and the regulations will be adopted by those who are there, and then they will not be strong enough, and a political moratorium will not make a change at all. So that is what I wanted to take the floor and to say, that both things are important, but just a political moratorium will really do nothing, because the convention, the Constitution of the Ocean, UNCLOS, says precisely that the Seabed Authority has to develop environmental rules, procedures, and regulations for exploration and exploitation. So what do countries who want mining to start say? Well, we have a mandate to develop these regulations, and we do have a mandate. But that mandate also includes to ensure the effective protection of the marine environment. And that's where, during negotiations, countries need to be there and need to make sure that no regulation is adopted until those environmental safeguards are there so strongly that mining will not start until you can comply with them. And at this time, nobody can comply with them because we don't have enough information on the wonderful biological environment and ecosystems that are in the seabed. So I'm sorry I took so much time, but I just, my intervention is just to try to motivate everyone. How can you help? Please make your representatives attend the meetings, and when they attend the meetings, make sure that environmental safeguards are included and that transparency is also promoted, because so far the Seabed Authority has not been transparent as it should be. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. I think you can hear from the applause that your presentation was well received and added to the answer the questions that was asked, and I'm sure what many of us were looking for. But I know that we are pressed for time, so let me, Petra wanted to speak. I'm not sure if there's anybody else who wanted to say something.
Just very, very briefly. So that means if we do not manage to have a moratorium until July 2023, the Seabed Authority will give licenses to these countries and firms who applied, and then they will start with the exploration. That means, and with all the effects that we heard from Mr. Gianni, that it will take millions of years for the biology down there to recover, for the reason that some, not the economy, but some shareholders will have profits for some years. And that maybe e-mobility will, which is not the solution to our problems, as we know, will be fostered. What I additionally would like to ask, it was mentioned that the European Union is among those members. Are there also single European Union members able to participate and to also decide who exactly is member of the Seabed Authority? All the UN member countries, or just those who really actively became part of it? Because I think it's really important to know where Boris mentioned the Czech Republic is also a landlocked country and is in the list of those who want to become active in that. And I always have the problem that I even do not know, my ministries even do not know who is in charge of the oceans. Yeah, I'm trying to find out who I can communicate about SDG 14, life under oceans, for months, and I cannot find out. Yeah, so maybe we can get some hints who exactly from the European Union is able to speak and to vote there. And I also would like a last question to ask. We learned that a moratorium is a compromise and that the ban would be the first choice. How likely is it to get to a ban?
Okay. I see that Mr. Gianni has his hand up, so I'll just go straight to it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just in answer to your question on the EU membership, all 27 member countries of the European Union are members of the International Seabed Authority, as is the European Union overall, separate from its members. The membership of the ISA is automatically granted to any country that has ratified the Law of the Sea Convention. So at this stage, there are 167 countries that have ratified the Law of the Sea. Plus, the EU separately has ratified in areas where the European Union has competence over matters related to the law of the sea, above and beyond its member states. I would just also like to briefly say I really appreciate Ambassador Guillen from Costa Rica's statements. I think it really is a problem that less than half of the countries that are members of the Assembly go to ISA meetings. This meeting of the Assembly in August of this year is critical because it will be the last meeting before the only meeting this year, and the meeting that takes place in 2023 will allow for 3 more sessions of negotiation by the Council between August and next year at the same time. And the Council may decide to advance the regulations to such an extent without any input from Assembly members that it may make it very difficult to then call for a moratorium, a pause, better regulations, or whatever it is that Assembly members would like to do. So from the point of view of parliamentarians, it would be very important to raise the need for a moratorium, to raise the need for protecting the environment, and to raise the need for reform of the ISA with your respective governments. Prior to August, encourage them to go. And I might add that as Ambassador Guillen and Ambassador Figueroa from Chile, who's also joined us, know, the ISA has a fund for developing country participation. So if your country wants to send your environment minister or foreign affairs minister or representation, they should be able to avail themselves of the funding that the ISA makes available to developing countries to actually physically go to Jamaica. However, it may be even easier to attend this year. It's not clear to us yet the modality of the meeting in August. It's August 1 through 5. But if it's a hybrid meeting, then it makes it a little bit easier to attend. You don't actually physically have to go. You can participate online, but as a participant with speaking rights. So again, we would encourage as many governments to go, and the extent to which the parliamentarians can get on government delegations, whether virtually or in person, and go and express concerns over the direction that these negotiations are taking would be extremely helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm looking at the time and I'm seeing where we are, so I will just turn over to Representative Esther Cuesta. That will take us through the next steps.
Thank you, Angela. I don't know if I can have the laptop. Thank you, Angela. You know, having this conversation makes me think, and the ambassador of Costa Rica really motivated me, of, you know, having also an Amazon authority, you know, which is in real danger, especially for us Amazonian countries. You know, having the Amazon, the largest tropical forest, also, you know, the authority to control and monitor the protection of you know, probably the largest biodiversity that we have in the planet. But so it's my pleasure to convene to follow this discussion as Deputy Convener of the PGA's International Law and Human Rights Program, a member of Ecuador's Parliament. My country, Ecuador, highly values the sustainability and protection of the marine environment. In fact, Ecuador was one of the 37 countries and 530 civil society organizations that voted in favor of Motion 69 at the International Union for Conservation of Nature in September, calling for the protection of deep ocean ecosystems and biodiversity through a moratorium on seabed mining. It has been very, very interesting to have this discussion, to hear Mr. Jani, to hear the ambassador, and every one of us with your comments. And as a time-sensitive issue, I think it's really important that we have these discussions to determine how best to protect the deep seabed, which is vital to the balanced ecosystem that sustains both our planet and many livelihoods, including human life. So I really look forward to exploring together the next steps for the protection of the seabed, continuing working towards our commitment made in the Belmopan Plan of Action. So I really would like to open the second part of the discussion to everyone. And I think, let me see, I think if I have a hand. Okay, let's see. Can I see? Can I have it like gallery? Because I think Miss Mary Toussaint, also member of the European Parliament, would like to speak. So I want to see. I want to make sure I see her.
Actually, hello.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Philippine. I'm her assistant, and she actually had to cancel last minute, so I'm here for her. But I can say a couple of words on her behalf, if that's fine.
Yes, yes, it's fine.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, thank you very much for including us in this conversation and for all of your presentations and talks. So Marie Toussaint is a French member of the European Parliament. As you could see in the presentation by Mr. Gianni, France is actually a very active country pushing for deep sea mining. So we are trying to work closely with NGOs in France to change that. But yeah, and at the European level, we've managed to actually put into different legislations and reports a very explicit call for an international moratorium on deep sea mining. And we're now trying to get the European Commission to answer that call very explicitly, very clearly, and to, as the speaker before said, to actually attend the meeting in August and take a strong stand on the future ISA meeting. So in the meantime, we of our work at the European level, we believe that we need to create more noise at the international level. And as you know, the Lisbon conference that's coming up is going to be a very crucial opportunity to make that noise and take the stage. So we are currently working on a sort of international declaration that would be a sort of declaration of support for the already existing Pacific Alliance that was presented by Mr. Regenvanu just before. So we actually are going to talk with Mr. Regenvanu next week. So the declaration is still a work in progress, and we actually can include a lot of things that have been said today, including a very strong push for countries to attend meetings and take a stance there at the ISA meeting. But basically the declaration would include a call for a moratorium and for a complete reform of the ISA. So this idea would be to unveil this, this declaration in Lisbon with the Pacific Alliance of Parliamentarians. So we will come back to all of you, and we're working very closely with PGA on this and with the DSCC, with members from working at the European level. So we will come back to all of you very soon, hopefully with the text, and we hope that we can count of all of your support. Obviously, we think that if we manage to gather a large number of parliamentarians from all continents, we will add an important and strong voice against deep sea mining. But this would also be a sort of first step towards working together further and after this, after Lisbon, and in the next steps. So yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have our colleague, Honorable Bernard George, MP from Seychelles, who would like also to speak. Hello, Bernard. I hope you're fine.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you for stepping in for me at the last minute. Much appreciated.
Here's Sarah.
Oh, there you go. Sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry that I'm not there. But let me try and address a couple of things which have been bothering me for a little while. And great that Ecuador should be speaking in my stead, because we're very similar. You got the Galapagos, we have Aldabra, which is the Indian Ocean version. So I hear a lot of what you're saying. First of all, I'd like to ask, what is the impetus right now? Is it in favor of a moratorium? And perhaps Mr. Gianni could answer that. Is it in favor of a moratorium, or is it is the force still trying to stop that? I think that is something that I'd like to get familiar with. And I think we've heard a lot of good things here today, and I think we all realize that it's a no-brainer. The trying to get a moratorium, in fact, ensuring that we get a moratorium is the first step towards an eventual outright ban, which may be a bit more difficult to achieve. How do we do that? In fact, Senator McPherson asked, what are the basic steps that parliamentarians can take? And I've been mulling over that. It's all fair and fine, I think, to say, let's encourage our governments to participate, let them go to meetings of the ISA, let's try and get on delegations. But how exactly do we do that? How in practice do we get the message across to, and that comes back to my first question, where is the impetus? Are most governments in favor, or are most governments reticent? How do we get the message across to them? And I can only speak in terms of small parliaments, such as mine. And I think one of the things that, one of the ways of doing that, talking to parliaments, talking to governments that might be tone deaf, might not even consider that this is an issue. One of the ways of doing that is, of course, to bring a motion before the House and to get that passed, because that at least will focus the government on or at least focus Parliament on the issue, focus government on the issue, perhaps focus the press on the issue, and might lead to one or two NGOs taking up the battle and leading the fight. This is certainly what we're going to do, and I'm so happy to have heard Ralph, as the leader of the opposition of Vanuatu, take up the fight in the Pacific. And in many respects, it's not government majorities that will lead the fight, but it's the opposition. I think that shouts louder, and certainly he's proved that in Vanuatu. Now, given that it's a no-brainer, given that that it's something that is, I think, achievable, because it's a compromise solution, given that we need to sensitize our parliaments and our governments, I'm looking for guidance here. What do the delegates think? I'm thinking in terms of a motion before the House. What do delegates think might also be other ways of getting governments who might not be aware of the magnitude of the problem to become aware of that? Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. We need to end this session very soon, but we have Constanza Figueroa, who has asked to speak.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we do, very well.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I agree absolutely with my colleague, Ambassador Guillén. We work together at the ISA. I am permanent representative from Chile, and I am the ambassador of Chile to Jamaica also. The thing is that my opinion is that it will be more realistic to ask the countries a temporary moratorium until we can have a strong regulation that effectively protect the marine environment. Like Ambassador Guillén said, the UNCLOS has mandated us to create a regulation, and I see very difficult that the countries renounce to that mandate. So I think that a temporary moratorium would be a little bit more realistic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Figueroa. Now I'll turn to David
Yes.
Donat Catlin for closing remarks.
Yes, and I'm sorry that we need to leave because they have a function for lunch and they gave us a deadline. But we will move to the PJ office altogether, and we will have time to continue strategically. I think what we will do next, and Sarah can integrate here with Leila, also who is our consultant online, we are going to send this basic toolkit, which is of course an initial an initial document. It can be improved because this is a new area for work for us, but I read it and it's an excellent document where you have a number of options of what you can do in your country. As the ambassador of Chile and as also our friends from the Deep Sea Coalition, Conservation Coalition told us, the moratorium, let's call it even temporary, but the moratorium is always temporary by definition in law, to make it pass. At the same time, I'm very happy that Gina joined us. Sorry, Gina, to call you by first name, because you were with us in The Hague and New York for so many years on the ICC, and you protected the integrity of the Rome Statute in your previous job. Then you moved to the President of the Republic office, and we are so happy to find you now in charge of such a delicate dossier. But what I would suggest, what would be interesting with our friends from the Pacific Islands who also joined the PGA. So our member, the leader of the opposition of Tuvalu, with this occasion decided to join PGA. It's a way also for us to get new members. Our member from the European Parliament, Marie Toussaint, who is also a leader on many issues, also is a member of PGA. Let's bring all our forces together. But if Gina and all the leaders in the International Seabed Authority, if you can create some sort of a like-minded states group, where we can also, as part of our toolkit, let's say in the Netherlands, in Italy, we can push that our parliamentarian can ask the government to join the like-minded group, so that the compelling arguments that Gina gave us, the common heritage of humankind, comes first in the agenda. So we lock those governments, at least in the countries where we can have an influence, either from the government or from the opposition or jointly, and tell them you have to join the like-minded states. And Matthew Gianni really gave us the main argument also in the economic sense, because the minerals that can be found are so small. They are not a game changer. It's not that we will have more batteries for cars. It's a fake industrial argument, because the distraction that it will be made to gain very little in terms of extraction, it doesn't even have an economic value. So I think the arguments are so big and so strong that we can, as Bernard Georges said, it's a no-brainer. He speaks so eloquently. So I think we can really use these set of arguments and move forward in a very dynamic way. And then we have the ambassadors and the legal representatives, the legal advisors, who will tell us in August who's missing. If they can let us know on the first day, we can maybe even create some sort of mechanism in PGA, an alert that, you know, if Sweden doesn't show up, maybe from the opposition and from the government, our member can make an urgent telephone call to the minister or things like this, so that we have we can make an impact. Thank you very much. Yes.
Very quickly. I think that is also important for ASEAN, because right now in Malaysia, there have been some academic articles that say that the richness of these minerals can be found in Southeast Asia. And I know that Singapore is looking into exploring it. But I think the advantage of having a coalition appearance of our opposition leaders, like what you say, that we already have a structure like ASEAN, whether this can be brought at ASEAN level, because if individual countries can always say that it's their own personal interest to do it, and who they are aligned to on a global scale, who are Singapore's friends and who are Myanmar's friends and who are Malaysia's friends. And I think to bring that to domestic conversation, today we are speaking of so many other countries, and we have not addressed this in Malaysian Parliament. I don't know who's talking about it. If yes, you know, there's no conversation of it at all. I do know there have been some academic articles on it. And these articles, although they do speak little on the environment, they focus a lot on the economy, on technology, on these minerals, etc. And I think it's important for us to set the narrative for ASEAN before it goes in the direction of we have to dig and plunge the sea for these precious metals. And once that decision is made, to bring in the environmental factor and climate is going to be very difficult, because it's not a priority on the list anyway. It's about bringing investment into Southeast Asia, into ASEAN, etc. So I think as what the ambassador from Costa Rica had said very clearly on the UNCLOS, it's exploration and exploitation. So I think this is a very important factor that I'm going to bring back definitely to Malaysia. I do know the foreign ministry is in touch with this, but I don't think it's within their scope of jurisdiction. They may have been signatories to the convention, but you have to find out which are the ministries or agencies that are the ones who are going to implement it at the end of the day. And the fear is you don't know what you don't know. And if governments are going to do it with just amongst them and come out with a decision, it'll be too late to argue and fight. Although I do think these toolkits on the argument of whether it is actually really beneficial on the long run, if you want to speak about the technology of mining for these metals, versus the long-term and forever impact that it's going to have on the environment. So I think it's important to set the narrative and find a mechanism how we can penetrate to the ASEAN mindset, which is a lot based on pulling in investment. If a big company from Europe is saying we're going to invest, Southeast Asia is going to say come, and they're going to bid among each other, saying, "Oh, we have this coastline, please come here," etc. At the end of the day. So I think there's something to
it's very, very unpolitical, but very important. On behalf of the board, I think we all wish Laila all the best. She will give birth to her first child in a few days. Laila, all the best for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you so much for those connected and for those who were here present. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, Matthew, but send us your input. This afternoon we'll continue within the board, the conversation. If you have a specific input, send us an email.
Okay, will do.
Stay in touch. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Senator.
everyone. Very good discussion. Very good discussion. Very helpful.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.